and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 151, 2022 in a nutshell, and an alternative A to Z to expand our horizons. I tried to make my last episode of the year a summary of the last 12 months. Now, clearly that's not going to be hugely interesting to some of you, so I'm doing a mixed episode this year. I'll cover my summary in the 4 seasons rather than monthly, so it shouldn't be too painful. Then I'll get into something that piqued my interest. So 2022, let's start with winter. I had a bit of a slow start, largely because I'm a sad sufferer, and since I stopped spending 10 days every 6 weeks in the Middle East, I miss my top-up of vitamin D. Having said that, business was brisk, and I was presented with a few interesting opportunities. My learning from this quarter was that even though the diary was busy, I need to ensure I have additional recharge time during these darker winter months. This learning has promulgated through my calendar into 2023. Spring was a busy and important quarter for me, as I was stacked out delivering courses and creating my new website. If you've never done this, don't underestimate the effort required, not from a technical perspective as much as the content angle. I can tell you it's no mean feat for somebody who doesn't really like talking about themselves and putting it in writing. What I realised, though, was that I had to get out of my own way and write copy that spoke directly to my introverted clients, past, present and future. So the learning became clear from this quarter. Get out of my own way, stop playing small, stop holding myself back. Now, I don't like key messages being all of those don'ts or negatives as I see them, so here is the more productive version. My key learning is that I need to be the sassiest version of myself so that people know what I stand for and what I'm really about. This has served me well so far in 2022, and this version of me was certainly evident in my brand photo shoot, something I normally dislike intensely. And I'd be up for having my photo taken by the very talented Brigitte anytime. During the summer, work was interspersed with lovely opportunities, and I appreciated the space in my calendar to breathe and just be. Thus started a pattern for my ideal working schedule. Now, I'm not there yet in terms of having it as a year-round pattern, but I'm very definitely working towards it. Running my own business shouldn't mean such a rammed diary at my stage of life. I'm somewhat envious of those who get this sorted out early in their business, and I am where I am. So my learning from the summer was to make sure I can enjoy those lazy, hazy days of summer before the craziness of autumn begins. Everything has its seasons: life, business, friendship, and the body. My intent is to honour those seasons. This brings us to autumn, and there is something I love about this season, especially when we spend some of it in France. Now, that hasn't happened for a few years now, but I plan to be in southwest France next year for a holiday. This autumn was filled with many wonderful opportunities that I grabbed with both hands. There was a women's leadership retreat to plan with my colleague Judith, and we finally settled on the name Destination Untamed. Watch this space. And there were articles to write, one of which got me massive exposure. And finally, excitement in the family about the upcoming wedding of my stepson. All in all, a very satisfying end to the year. My learning from this season is to say yes to whatever is aligned with my purpose, just as long as I balance it with sufficient downtime. This year I also scheduled in holding retreats on each solstice and each equinox, and that's something I'll be continuing through 2023. So what's my summary of 2022? It's this: staying present enables me to notice opportunities. Saying yes keeps me working at the outer edge of my comfort zone more often, and choosing to show up fully makes more impact in the world. I encourage you to think about your summary for 2022 and feel free to share it with me by email. Send it to Joanna@flourishingintroverts.com. You'll find that your summary sets you up for a remarkable year to come, and I'm all for that. Now, you know that I've committed to be more playful and to take myself less seriously. So here's the second part of my end of year message. Some of you know I'm a big fan of Susie Dent, an English lexicographer, etymologist, and master of language. I recently bought her emotional dictionary to open my mind to long-lost words and terms. They seem altogether more intriguing and playful. It's a wonderful book that reminds us of words that have been long forgotten, so I thought I'd share a complimentary A to Z of my Seasonal Sanity Savers. I share my Seasonal Sanity Savers throughout all of December with my introvert community in the Introverts Corner Facebook group and by email for those who don't do Facebook. So let's call this the alternative A to Z, so you can surprise your friends and family with some new words. And if it causes them to rush to the dictionary or thesaurus, so much the better. Just a warning though, I'm not a linguist, so my pronunciation may be a little off. But I'm okay with that, and I hope you can forgive me. Enjoy. Are you prone to after-wit, a realisation that comes too late? It can be the cause of our sleepless nights for sure. If you are prone to it, then find ways to let it go, as chances are you're the only one remembering the situation. Then make sure to replenish so you get to experience ataraxy, the feeling of calmness, untroubled by mental distress. As December and 2022 draws to a close, we're now legitimately back-endish. That's how we feel at the end of the year. It's a perfect phrase, isn't it? And as the chimes begin, you or others may feel basorexia, the sudden impulse to kiss someone. So be careful who you're in close proximity to as we bring in the new year. If you choose to see the new year in with others, you may be surrounded by people who feel cherubimical, a happy drunk. That's the time to resist cavoli riscaldati, the pointless attempt to revive a romance. Steer clear of that. Many introverts are accused of being dardle-dum-doos, or daydreamers, and often it's because we're avoiding or are already dumbfungled, which is feeling exhausted. Very few introverts I know feel empleomania, the compulsive desire for public office. I'm prepared to be in the public eye, but it's certainly not compulsive. I'm just looking for eucatastrophe, a happy resolution, and in my case, to the extroversion bias. I have a little business to complete and work to do over the festive season. When you run your own business, there's often not enough downtime. But I need to make sure I'm not fouchal about it, as this is to work listlessly or lazily. That will only prolong the tasks, and I don't want to be doing that. Instead, I need to be feckful, which is full of vigour and industriousness. I am prone to being a guggle mug, perpetually cheery, and I try my best not to be glaikit, which is stupid or thoughtless. That's why I feel so strongly about asking for feedback whenever possible. I don't want to end my life feeling yin-yang, that feeling of regret over something that might have been. So I need to avoid being hypocritical, which is acting in contradiction to my beliefs. That's why I remind myself of my purpose and retain my passion for it. I have an inklith, a faint notion, that some of you may be giving up on this episode about now, so you could accuse me of imprescience or a lack of foresight, and yet still I continue. So please don't send me a Jeremiad, a complaining tirade, or a jobation, a lecture of rebuke. See instead if you can engage a sense of cavil, so you feel pride in what someone else has accomplished. In this case, me, with my alternative A to Z. Stick with me on this. By all means, partake in a bit of private lalachezia, the relief from stress or pain by swearing, and see if you can get back to feeling letterbund, which is feeling full of joy. It is the season for it after all. Do whatever you can to avoid matutolapia, which is irritability in the mornings, as it can set your day off on the wrong foot and might result in fits of mubble-fubbles or fits of despondency throughout the day. That's not good for your stress or well-being. You may have gathered from last week's episode that I'm prone to feeling nesh, which is highly sensitive to the cold, and that's when I'm drawn to nidificate, to build a nest to hunker down into. How about you? What do you do when you feel nesh? The results of my nidification are an ablectament, a source of delight, and it's where I retreat to when I'm feeling overmused or feeling exhausted from thinking. Overmused, what a great word. Many introverts are perpetually on the brink of feeling overmused, I reckon. I'm fortunate in that I don't feel pantophobia, generalised fear or anxiety, which I know many people do, both introvert and extrovert, by the way. But I can't, in all consciousness, reject being called a philocalist, a lover of beautiful things. And for the record, many of those beautiful things that I love are free, like frost on a spider's web, a toddler's laughter, the first crocus poking their heads through the snow. I'd like to think that no one would call me a quake buttock. The perfect description of a coward, don't you think? One of my business principles is to be quietly gutsy, and it's something I feel very strongly about. That and my other business principles stop me from quiddling, which is wasting time on unimportant things. Life is too short and my mission too important. I consider myself to be wreckful, which is full of consideration, and ruthful, which is full of compassion for my fellow introverts and their challenges. It's because I've been there myself, faced the challenges, stepped into my power and chosen my flourishing path. And that is how I want to help other introverts now. My journey has brought out my sapiophile tendencies that have drawn me to intelligent people that I can sometimes also be intimidated by. But I'm getting over myself on that one, as remaining intimidated would leave me saturine or gloomy in outlook. That is a road to nowhere. I can always tell when I'm heading for a think ache, that state of mental exhaustion, as I twithought more often. That's when my thoughts disappear as soon as I focus on them. Has that ever happened to you? It's a sure sign that I'm on the slippery slope to introvert burnout when I notice that. I imagine I'll be doing a fair bit of outveien, which is to clear the mind by being out in windy weather. My favourite place to do this is by the seaside, as I love to feel the wind and the waves take my breath and any angst from me. After that, I'm very likely to or curl up in the nest I built when I was nidificating. We're clearly coming towards the end of the alphabet now, and I do hope this alternative A to Z has not been entirely vapid, which is offering nothing stimulating. My greatest hope is that it has provided vril, or a mysterious source of energy. We're reaching that point of the year when whiffling or indecisiveness is best used up with the leftovers or packed away with the decorations. That creates the space for win, which is a delight or pleasure. I know what I'd rather have. It's the season for xenodochi, kindness to strangers, and all of my clients start out as strangers, and those who choose to work with me engage me as a xenagogue, a guide. As I've already mentioned, I've been there and got the t-shirt, so whilst nobody else's journey will be the same as mine, I have an understanding and can readily demonstrate real empathy. I've noticed that I can be quite a yarmagorp or a persistent yawner, and one of my clients tends to do this when we're on the cusp of a breakthrough. My sign is less acceptable as I belch or burp. It's unusual but reliable. Although once I've reached that breakthrough point and after a bit of earling again, I tend to feel yar or lively and energised. Shifting the bias is tough work, and I'm rarely welcomed by organisations, as my process included pointing out where the extroversion bias is embedded in their everyday practices and processes. What I really want to avoid is a zugzwang, which is a no-win situation, because that is just going to entrench positions. What I'm aiming for is solutions and business relationships that are zipless or uncomplicated. So that's my alternative A to Z, and my intention was to offer a bit of light relief, an alternative, a different look at A to Zs as we dip into the more obscure words in both ours and others' rich language. As I said, I'm no real linguist, but I do love a bit of a delve into the thesaurus or dictionary. I wish you a fabulous 2023, filled with all that lights you up, stretches you, and brings you joy. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us, and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.